we're going to start delving into fertility for nutrition, for fertility, and I'm really interested in this topic myself, and I'm really glad Jen's here to help us navigate it, because personally, whenever I go into like a foray of I'm going to learn about nutrition and fertility, I get midway through a book and just go, oh no, it's too much.
Too much.
I'm hoping if everyone else feels the same way, because I can see Kira laughing, we've discussed this before, it's a bit like, so if you could like help us sort of break it down, that would be great. So
I'll do my best.
On you go. There's still people joining, which is lovely. But you just start, Jen, because like I said, we're recording it anyway.
Sure.
If anyone misses anything, then they can always rewatch
You've got it.
Right?
Okay. So, hi, great. Thank you so much, Anne, for giving me the chance to chat to you guys. It's a great topic. Obviously, it's really important, really emotional, and emotive to a lot of people. And obviously, everybody's really interested. And what I would say from the start is you can read loads and loads of things that tell you eat this particular nutrient, don't eat this, do that. I like to really keep it really basic, and if you're eating the right things, just basics, then you can then start to add things in if you need to. If you find that you've got a particular issue or concern, or you've got a cause that you know about, then we can look at specifics. But generally, it's about the basics. And for me, nutrition, it's really, really integral to fertility. If you think about it, the building blocks, the building blocks for everything within our body come from the food that we eat, and that includes hormones. That includes how you look after the health of the eggs, that includes sperm as well, if we're talking about the men too, that sort of thing. So it's really, really important that we make sure that we're eating the right things for that. Things like, in general, we all know that we need calcium for bones and for teeth. We also need it for heart and things like that. But you also need it for making sure that you're ready for conception as well, that type of thing, because you're going to need it for that baby. Magnesium is really important for energy levels. We need it for muscle. We need it actually for 300 different functions in the body, slightly more than 300 I think it is. But it's also really good for PMT symptoms as well. So some things we know and some things we don't know, but in general, if we make sure that we're eating a really good balanced diet, then we're making sure that we've got all the cofactors that we're going to need in place when we start to try to conceive. The first thing that I always start with really is the hormone balance. If your cycle is out of balance, then one, it's really difficult for you to work out when you're actually ovulating, but it also suggests that if the hormones are out of sync, then you might have an issue further down the line, and those have to be in sync to start with. So that's really where I start with it. But also when you think about nutrition, it's important not just to eat the right things, but you need to try and make sure we're metabolizing the right way, and that our gut is working properly in order to actually get the best from those nutrients. So that's another place to start with. It's not just about making sure you're eating for hormones, it's making sure you're eating for your gut and that you can metabolize those things. If your gut isn't working properly, then you're not going to be able to get those nutrients out of the food and put it to the right place in the body.
So you could be eating all the right things, but your body's not breaking them down and absorbing them right. Is that what you're saying? So is
Absolutely.
that the building block you start with then, like gut health?
Yes, you have to start. We would look at hormone balance and also look at gut health. Kind of look at the whole thing sort of holistically, if you like, because as well as your gut, you want to make sure your liver's working properly, because your liver's job really is to detoxify the toxins that you don't want to be there that might cause you an issue, but also to detoxify any excess hormones. So if you have extra estrogen, then you're going to put that balance with the progesterone and the testosterone out. So you want to be getting rid of the excess estrogen every month. And that's what your liver does, that detoxifies it. So there's foods that you can eat to make sure you're doing that properly. And there's foods you want to try and avoid so that you're not clogging up your liver, if you like. And then obviously at the end of the day, you need to be excreting it. So we need to make sure your bowels are working properly. Because if you don't, then that excess hormones can basically get recirculated back into your body. So if you're not getting rid of it properly. So the whole thing is really, really important.
Okay. So that's your kind of general thoughts on the links between nutrition and fertility. You think it's important, and it's not quite as simple as you think of just taking some things and that'll work. It's about gut health, absorption, and also differences in terms of time of the cycle then, in terms of what we should be eating at different times. I think we're going to touch on that later, aren't we? We're going to talk about what you need to eat at different points in the cycle. So, but I just cut you off there. What were you going to say?
That's okay. I was really just going to go on and talk about what I'd suggest are the basics, or what are the basics that you need to be looking at, to give you an overview. So you're talking really about making sure that your macronutrients are good. So your macronutrients are your carbohydrates, your proteins and your fats.
Okay.
So carbohydrates that's your main energy source. So you want to make sure that you've got maybe half of your plate is carbohydrates, but you want the right carbohydrates. So by that I mean we want complex ones, we don't want simple. And by that I mean you want to try and avoid things like the white bread, white rice, white pasta, those sort of things, cakes, sweets, that type of thing, where you can, because those are the things that really give you that sugar spike, they increase your insulin, and that impacts your hormones as well. You go for the complex ones, so eat the brown bread, the brown rice, eat grains like your oats, quinoa, that type of thing. That's going to give you things like fibre, which is really helpful for making sure that you're clearing out those toxins from your bowel. It's also going to keep you fuller and stop you trying to snack on the things that maybe we want to avoid.
Okay. So around half your plate, did you say there?
Around half of your plate you want to have to be carbohydrates. And people do worry about having too much carb and being really carb heavy, but it's more about the type of carbs that you have. So it's going for those complex ones and trying to avoid the simple ones that are really going to give you that sugar spike, and then you're going to go running looking for a snack later on really quickly, because you something that's going to sort of really balance out that sugar over time and balance the hormones, that type of thing. And then with proteins, you want to look for lean proteins. So you want to try and not necessarily avoid red meat, but maybe cut back your red meat to maybe a minimum of 1 or 2 portions a week, I would say, for that. And the reason for that is that red meat can be quite inflammatory, and we really want to go for an anti-inflammatory balance in the body when you're trying to conceive, particularly. So you want to go for lean proteins, so that would be your white meats like chicken, that type of thing, but also things like legumes, so that's your chickpeas, lentils. You want nuts and seeds, those type of things. They're really good sources of protein that you can get in the diet. And if you try and have maybe a palm-sized portion of protein with every meal that you have through the day, that's also a really good way to balance your blood sugar and help to metabolize those carbohydrates that you're eating as well.
Okay.
So, and then the other macronutrient is your fats. And people do try to avoid fats because they see it as bad, but actually you really need to have a good level of fats. It's what fats you eat that you need to be careful of. So again, we're trying to avoid the trans fats and the saturated fats from your cakes and the biscuits and sweets, that type of thing, and go for what we may class as the good fats. So again, that's your nuts and your seeds, that's maybe your lean meats, that type of thing that you want to eat. You want to eat more of those things, eggs, that type of thing as well.
Okay.
And the reason for that, mainly particularly when you're trying to conceive, is that those hormones, so estrogen, progesterone and testosterone, are what we call steroid hormones, which means they're made from cholesterol. So you need to have a really good balance of fats in your diet to make you're actually making those hormones, and you've got the cofactors in there to get them. So that's really important. So when I talk about the basics, it's have a really varied diet. Sometimes we talk about a rainbow diet, so have lots of colours in your diet, lots of different fruits and vegetables, as many as you can really fit into your week if you can, because you're trying to get a really good balance to give your gut microbiome as much diversity as possible, because that's really helpful for your gut to do the jobs that it needs to do in helping to metabolize and stimulate the hormones.
Okay.
So that you can, you're getting a lot of antioxidants. So the more colour there is in your fruit and veg, the more highly antioxidant that vegetable or fruit is going to be. So things particularly like berries, so you want blueberries, strawberries, raspberries, all of those things into your diet are really, really good to have all the time, just to snack on.
Really good time of year for them, aren't they? For all the berries.
Yeah, so they're really, really helpful to have as well. So that's what I'm talking about, the basics. And then other things to think about, I suppose, are things maybe to try and cut back on. So things like your alcohol and your caffeine that we know about, they're quite pro-inflammatory to the body, and they're quite, they're good at stopping the nutrients being absorbed as well in the body. So if you can cut back on those things as well, then that can be really helpful as well. So just making sure that you're really quite hydrated, but stick more to the water, and some herbal teas as well sometimes.
Okay.
Really good.
I don't know if you know much about endometriosis, but when I'm hearing inflammatory there, I'm thinking, oh, if someone has endometriosis, poor Ashley's really suffering with it. Would red meats, and like you say, is it that anti-inflammatory, was that something that, is it something extra you need to think about, those inflammatory type
Yeah,
things?
absolutely. I would definitely be thinking about that. So red meat. So there's different types of omega fats, if you like, and that you can eat. So, and red meat is really high in omega-3, which itself is inflammatory. Whereas omega-3s, which you get from the other sort of the good fats, we're talking about the oily fish, nuts,
Right.
seeds, those type of things, is pro-inflammatory, if you like. It sort of sends all your sort of systems down the pro-inflammatory route. So definitely if you're thinking about endometriosis or fibroids or even Pcos, that type of thing, you want to be aiming to try and be anti-inflammatory. So those are really good for that. Okay. And as well, to add for anti-inflammatory is sort of your herbs and spices. So things like turmeric, garlic.
I've heard that.
All of those guys are really anti-inflammatory. So the more,
that's why it's an anti-inflammatory effect, right?
Is really great, yes.
And you can't, we're going to talk about this later, and we will go into it later, but in terms of supplements, is that something like with like a spice like that, like turmeric, does that need to be in supplement form to really get the effect, or would it have that effect just by using the spice in your cooking? Is it quite effective even just then?
Yeah, it absolutely will have an effect. If you are suffering from something in particular, like you say, like endometriosis, if somebody was to come to me and they knew that that was causing an issue for them, I might be tempted to suggest that they take a supplement that includes turmeric, curcumin, which is the active ingredient in that. But in general, I would say just add those things to your food and your cooking, because they definitely do make a difference. A small tip for garlic: if you're going to put garlic in, what to do is crush the garlic and leave it sitting on the bench for about 10 minutes, because when you crush it, that's when the chemicals in there, they sort of they activate, if you like, or they sort of bind together, and that's when you get the activation. So if you give it 10 minutes on the board after it's been crushed and then add it to your food, you actually get a better antioxidant effect.
I'm always too lazy with garlic. Like, I know you should do that and it tastes better, but I'll just chuck it and then shove it in, and I'll do love the taste of it. But I've seen chefs like mash it down with a knife, and it always look, and I've done that like on a Saturday night, you know, when you've got more time, and it does taste better, and it must be to do with that.
Get yourself a garlic crusher, that's what I've got.
No, but then I always feel most of the garlic's left inside that. I don't know, maybe I need to get myself a better one. Right. Okay, so Brian is asking what other foods are inflammatory that we should avoid? So we talked about red meat. Is there anything else that's automatically trigger, like let's avoid that completely?
Yeah, so it's going to be your other sort of your trans and saturated fats. So that's your cakes and sweets and your biscuits and those guys, really. That and the red meat. Those are the biggies for
and alcohol and caffeine.
Yeah, and alcohol, obviously.
So what's a recommended sort of caffeine intake? Is it none? Or can you have?
No, it depends really on your own sensitivity, to be honest. We sort of say no more than 300 micrograms a day. So that's about, depending on how strong you take your coffee, that's probably about 3 or 4 cups of coffee a day. I would say conceive, possibly try and cut it back down. If you can go for none, that's even better. Some people are quite sensitive to it, so you might say you want to stick to maybe just 1 cup a day. But I would say maximum probably 3 cups a day would be. But that's a standard cup of coffee. And what to remember as well is that there's caffeine in tea, and there's also caffeine in the energy drinks and things. So if you're drinking those things, there's caffeine in Coca-Cola. So if you like your fizzy juice and things like that, those are things to think about, maybe cutting back on as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And are you okay with decaf? Do you think Rebecca's saying is decaf okay? You think it's all right, or is there issues with that?
I think it's all right. I suppose I would say if you're going to go for decaf, maybe try and go for maybe an organic brand, so that there's nothing else in it, if you like, no other nasties, you know, other chemicals and things.
Is that the treatment they give it to take the caffeine out?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, if you need it, go for the decaf if you really have to. Okay. But try and go for maybe an organic coffee or something is probably a good option.
Okay. So we cut you off there, and I don't know what train of thought we were on there, but that's cool. So we got on to the basic building blocks, and we're just, so that's like where we start. where do we start if we're looking to change and adapt diet? And
Yeah.
it's those basic building blocks, okay? So
Yeah,
again,
absolutely. Go for that. Go for that really basic diet, and by basic I mean cut out the bad stuff that we spoke about, the saturated fats and the processed foods, if you like, and try and go for a whole food diet as much as possible. Fresh foods, fruit, vegetables, nuts, seeds, lean proteins, good fats.
and would you recommend organic fruit and veg? That's the other thing, and organic meats and organic stuff.
I would say if you can go organic, then yes, that's definitely a way to go. It is really helpful, but it's not always possible to do that. It's not always possible to get those things in the supermarket. And I say to people, I'd much rather they eat an apple than not eat it because they can't find an organic.
An organic one, yeah.
But yes, organic is a good way to go for a couple of reasons. One, the soil these days, compared to sort of say 1950 60, the soils that we're growing our crops in these days is not quite as nutrient dense as it was, and the nutrients in the soil become the plant, if you like. So if you go for organic, you're kind of getting a wee bit better in terms of the nutrient balance. But also, if you go for organic, you're going for things that have not been treated with pesticides and chemicals, etc. So you're not taking in those chemicals as well. So you're getting something that's a bit cleaner. I'd say if you can't go organic, please don't panic about it. I'd rather, as I said, everybody goes for the fresh fruit and vegetable rather than not at all because they can't do organic. Just give your fruit and veg a really good wash before you eat it, sort of thing. Maybe in salt water is quite good to do that way. And there's a document online you can find. It's called the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. You might have heard of it. So I can put a link in for a website where you can get that sort of thing. So it talks about which products are the worst, if you like, for being bad, for having lots of chemicals and pesticides, and which ones are the best. So if you can't manage to do completely organic, it might be something to look at and say, well, actually, here's the things that I'm going to really try and stick to organic, and here's the things that it's not quite such a worry about.
All right, I'd love to read that. Definitely interesting.
Yeah. Tends to be things like your berries, so like strawberries, I think, and grapefruits and things are kind of at the top of the list in the last couple of years in terms of having lots of pesticides and chemicals. So you meant to try maybe organic for those, or at least make sure you're really washing them well when you get them home.
At least. Okay, so the next thing moving on to is changing what we need to eat throughout our cycle. So what little adaptations can we make, and is it important, or is it just about keeping those building blocks steady throughout the cycle?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So in general, I would say it's about keeping things steady, because if you're having that really varied diet that we've just spoken about, then you're getting in all of the nutrients that you really need. But having said that, sometimes I do speak to clients, if you're having issues with your hormone balance or with your cycle, if you want to try working on regulating that, there is something that I speak about which is called seed cycling. So I don't know if anybody's heard about that. So it's a really easy way to get some additional nutrients into your diet at different times of the cycle that can boost your hormone position at that time. So in the first phase of the cycle, which is day 1 to 14, if your cycle's normal, which we know we're not all 28 days, but in general, that follicular phase at the start is where your estrogen is starting to rise, just as the egg is ripening, ready for ovulation. So if you can add some things in there that are going to boost your estrogen levels, then that can be really helpful. So what we suggest during those first 14 days or so is maybe to add a tablespoon of flax seeds and a tablespoon of pumpkin seeds to your diet every day. So if you just grind them up, really easy to do, put them into smoothies, put them onto your porridge, dribble them over some salad, that type of thing, every day. And the reason for that, flax seeds have got what they call phytoestrogens in them. So they've got a really weak estrogenic effect. So they can boost the estrogen levels when they're a wee bit low, but they can also help to decrease them when they're high, just because of the action that they have on the cell receptors for estrogen. So they're good to have in that first phase. And also pumpkin seeds are really high in zinc. And we know that we need zinc to help produce progesterone. So that's kind of in preparation for that phase 2 where we're going to want the progesterone coming in. Okay. So that's phase 1, flax seeds and pumpkin seeds. And then in phase 2, we suggest that you switch over and you change that up to a tablespoon of sunflower seeds and a tablespoon of sesame seeds. And again, that's because sesame seeds are high in zinc and selenium that we know we need to increase progesterone. that's really good for that. And sunflower seeds have vitamin E, which is also known to support progesterone. So it's just a couple of wee quick things that are quite easy.
That to me is a really fascinating, that a tablespoon of those things can have that effect.
Yeah,
you know, it's such an
absolutely.
easy thing to add, but nutritionally they're so dense, aren't they?
Absolutely. They're really, really great. They've also got antioxidant properties and anti-inflammatory properties, and there's lots of research to suggest or to show that these particular seeds are high in these nutrients, and that those nutrients are really good for dealing with hormone balance and PMT and all of those sort of things. So really good.
I'm going to start that. I'm going to start that for PMT, definitely.
Yeah.
And are you better to buy the best ones you can afford? Again, to go back to, I don't know if there's such a thing as, or I guess there is, organic, or is it just?
There is organic that you can buy. So yes, I would say go for the best that you can get. But if you just, what to do is when you buy them, only grind them up just before you want to use them, because that's when you're sort of releasing those nutrients. If you grind,
so you're grinding them all up. You're grinding.
So yeah, stick them in a quick bowl and grind them up, or stick them in your NutriBullet with your smoothie, or pour them over your salad. So if you grind them up before you,
that just quick. Does that just make it a quicker effect, or is it necessary that you grind them up like that?
So it gives you a quicker and a better effect, and the reason for that is so nuts and seeds have a coating on them, and the reason that the idea is that they're supposed to be able to pass through an animal, and so for instance, if they were to pick up that seed from a plant, the idea is that a bird eats that seed, it then flies and it drops that seed, it excretes it at the other end somewhere else in the world, and then that plant can grow there. So seeds in particular have a coating on them that can sometimes be really hard to digest, because
okay, so that the bird is still intact when the bird, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you grind them up, you're kind of getting rid of that coating and making it easier for you to digest those nutrients.
Right, okay. So if you're not putting it in a smoothie and you're just having it in your porridge, just like a wee pestle and mortar or something like that? Just,
absolutely, yes, do that. And flax seeds, so flax seeds are also, you see them more as linseeds if you buy them in the supermarkets, and particularly here the linseeds. And try and go, if you can, for the brown ones rather than the golden ones, because they have the coating kind of off them, if you like, so they're a wee bit easier to eat.
Where would you suggest buying it? I always think of, I don't know, like high street places like Holland and Barrett, or like is there an online shop that's really good? I know Whole Foods was very good, but there's not really as many of them around. So is there anywhere?
Yeah, so I tend to just get mine from the supermarket and just grind them up, to be honest, if I can. So places like Morrison's are really good now for organic things as well, I've noticed, and Sainsbury's as well are fairly good. But I think there are some, to be honest, Amazon, you can look for organics.
I bought some flaxseed off Amazon, and I thought it came in and it said organic on it. So Ashley's saying you're saying smoothies, which are, I think they're a brilliant way of getting nutrients into you, but like, have you got a wee suggestion for any, like what sort of smoothies you would suggest to have?
So my favourite is a green smoothie, but not everybody likes it.
The look of them, isn't it? They taste nice, but sometimes they don't.
The thing is, you can tailor it to your own taste, and then as you get more used to the green in it, you can sort of move out. So mine that I have has 1 apple in it. I then put a big handful of spinach in it, a big handful of kale. I put about, I don't know, a chunk of cucumber in it as well. And then I'll put my seeds in it, that one as well, and a little bit of water. And then it's just, go to your own consistency with the water. If you really don't like the green, maybe put 2 apples in it, and then you can stagger it, that type of thing. Sometimes I'll put a chunk of beetroot in it, which is really good for antioxidant, really good for blood supply as well. Other times I'll put berries in it, so blueberries are really, really good, so I'll put some blueberries. Sometimes I come out with something that doesn't really look very good. It's like a bit like pond water, but it tastes good. Yeah, it tastes really good.
They are really good, and you can get such affordable wee smoothie makers, can't you? Like, you don't need to go, I mean, I know NutriBullets are brilliant. I've never quite splurged on one, but I have a wee, is it Breville? You know, like the one, it's like a wee, you get it in Morrison's and it's been crashing. Like, I always think I'm going to get a NutriBullet, but it won't die on me, this thing. And I'm like, I'm not buying one till this thing dies.
Do you know, that's the thing, up until about 6 months ago, I had a Breville one that I bought in Morrison's, as you say, and it lasted for years, and it's only recently that I've got a NutriBullet, and that's only because that one broke. And
it died, I know, and that was like 20 quid. So
yeah,
they are
absolutely.
good.
Yeah, they're brilliant.
So Alexandra's interested in that progesterone thing you were saying, so bringing up the progesterone. So we were saying about the seeds. Is there anything else you can do to bring up progesterone, do you think?
What else can we do for progesterone? Trying to think off the top of my head if there's anything in particular that I
can't think off the top of your head. I know it's hard. I mean, it's a big world, but if you can't think, then just again we can give you.
No, let me have a think about that for you, and I'll get back to you on that.
I know it's often it is often an issue with fertility struggles is the progesterone element.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
anything we can do to help would really be good there. So for you, so the terms of adapting through the month is really pretty much all about those seeds. So that's a really quick, easy way to change things up.
Yes, and just keeping to that really good diet if you can, sort of as little processed food as you can, because those things are really going to exacerbate your symptoms of PMS or bloating and nausea and flushes, etc., that you might get throughout your cycle. So if you can avoid those and get the really anti-inflammatory foods in that we spoke about, then hopefully you're going to have a much better time. And those seeds just give you that boost for those hormones.
Yeah. Okay, so the next question I had for you is on assisted reproductive technology, which often ladies go down, and we were actually discussing this in class on Wednesday night, like how we do sometimes underestimate what's going into your body when you're going through these treatments. So my question is there anything we can do going through treatments? Is there anything specific to do to even just help with that onslaught of drugs and the fatigue they cause and everything? Is there anything we can do with nutrition to help go through those IVF cycles?
So it's difficult to give any specifics because everyone will be different the way that they react, and every treatment is slightly different. So I would say it's about making sure that you're in the best physical health that you can be before you start that treatment and throughout. So again, it's going for that diet that's giving you all of those really good nutrients and being anti-inflammatory, and that's going to help you with those side effects. So if you're getting nausea and the hot flashes and things, that diet should be helping. Things like ginger is really good for nausea. So I'm going to talk about biscuits, but a wee ginger biscuit is actually a really good way to get ginger into your system. So that's always quite good. If you're getting hot flashes and things, we say things like go for cooling foods. That sounds a bit simple, but yet go for cooling foods. So go for things like apples, go for spinach and those type of things, the vegetables, go for carrots that are high in water, those type of things that are cooling on the body, and avoid the hot things, so like your spicy foods, that type of thing. Try and avoid those, avoid alcohol, avoid hot drinks and things like that. So those are for
you, it's touching on before you even embark on your IVF, which often you don't really have control over either, because you get to the front of the list and you're there, and sometimes it happens before you've had a chance to sort your
absolutely
at the best you can do. It's about getting your body in the best
in the best place. Obviously we all know that ideally you start thinking about conception sort of maybe 3 months or so before you start it. We sort of know that that's the ideal, but as you say, these things happen,
and it's a long journey for some ladies.
Absolutely. So it's just about doing the best, doing the best that you can. And then as I say, it's more about the specifics of the treatment. So depending on what treatment you've got, if you're taking an oral treatment, but then you have to think about the fact that passes through the stomach and goes through the liver and is detoxified through certain pathways depending on what that medication is. So for instance, I would say to anybody that's on supplements, you might want to consider stopping those supplements for 2 or 3 days before you take the treatment, up until 2 or 3 days afterwards, because you don't want to have anything that's going to affect how that medication is metabolized by the body. You get it in a particular dose so that it does what it's meant to do. And if you're taking supplements, then sometimes those might impact the way that works in the body. It might cycle through your liver slightly quicker or slightly slower, and then you're impacting that. So in general, I would say sometimes if you're taking specific supplements for your fertility, then maybe stop those over that period of time. But if you're getting injections, it's not such a big deal because that's going straight into the bloodstream and straight in, and it's bypassing the stomach and the liver, so you're not getting that detoxifying effect. So that's not quite so important.
Okay, that's a good point. And Claire's just saying about the spicy food was just if you had an adverse reaction to the drugs you're on, in terms of giving you, some women get like hot flashes.
Yes.
Claire was just, she missed that. So you're just saying that's going to exacerbate those kind of side
Yeah.
effects.
Yeah, absolutely. If you like your curries and things, then absolutely go for them as normally. But if you're suffering from those hot flashes, it sounds like a really simple thing, but actually it's important to try and cut out those hot foods.
Okay, so I want to ask you, I know I've spoken to you about this before, I mean, I never really waited for your answer because I knew you would answer it tonight, but your opinion on nutritional supplements then.
Yeah.
Do you think diet can do it on its own, or what do you think about nutritional supplements?
So food and diet is always the first thing to do. So I would never suggest supplements to somebody that I haven't spoken to already about food and tried to sort of go with that diet that we've spoken about already. But yes, I do very often suggest supplements to clients, not just for fertility, but any clients. And the reason for that, there's a few reasons for that. So sometimes I might have a client who comes in there, they're on a vegan diet, for instance, and we know that you can get B12 if you're on a vegan diet, so you would definitely want to make sure that they're supplementing. But even if you're not on any kind of restrictive diet, as we spoke about earlier about soil depletion and the use of pesticides and chemicals and things like that, we know that we don't always get enough nutrients. And if you're not always eating a balanced diet, if you're not somebody that gets your 5 to 7 portions of fruit and veg a day, then a good multivitamin is always quite a good thing to do. So that's always something that I would sometimes suggest to my clients. But in terms of fertility and trying to conceive specifically, we all know that folic acid is kind of the big one that you're always told to take. So I would always suggest someone to take a folate supplement when they're trying to conceive. You can get it through diet. You get folate from green leafy vegetables, oranges, those type of things, and it's really important to have those in your diet. But it doesn't just deal with or help to prevent neural tube defects. It's also a building block for DNA. It's necessary for red blood cell formation and for proper cell division, those type of things. And it's quite difficult to get it all from your diet. You know, you'd have to eat quite a lot of dark leafy greens and legumes and oranges and things to get exactly how much you need. So certainly when somebody's trying to conceive, I definitely talk to them about taking a folate thing as well. And then there are other supplements as well and different nutrients that we know can support fertility. And depending on the client, I might suggest that they take some of those, but it's different for everybody. And even, you know, I could have two clients that are talking to me about trying to conceive. I won't necessarily suggest that they take the same things, but there's definitely some things that I might ask them to take once we've looked at their food things.
I think that's one issue that gets quite emotive with fertility, because there's so much out there, and especially social media algorithms and things like that, they end up getting bombarded with all these things, and then sometimes some ladies end up like shake them and they'd rattle, and it's totally understandable because they want to do everything, but again, it's about picking the right things, and it's hard to get clear advice on it, to be honest. So
yeah, absolutely, it's really difficult, and it's
place, definitely, yeah,
and it's difficult here for me to give you some sort of specific advice. We're talking quite general, and it does depend on the client. It does depend on what their diet might be lacking, and it does depend on what they might be dealing with. And that's not just as in terms of trying to conceive or any particular issues that they know might be causing that, but it's just them general, their general health. You know what's been going on with them for the last few years, what their stress levels are like as well. Stress is a massive thing that we talk to people about, and that's exactly why you do what you do, and yoga is a huge thing. I send just about every one of my clients for yoga, not just those that are trying to conceive, but I tell them because stress makes a huge difference, and it makes a huge difference on how you metabolize and use those nutrients. So for instance, we spoke about the hormones and how they're made from cholesterol, but the pathway that makes those nutrients or makes those hormones, as I should say, also makes cortisol. And if you have stress levels, then your body's making cortisol, and that's taking it away from making things like progesterone in your system. So it's really, really important to do your best to manage your stress. So all of those things would come into play when I'm talking to a client about what supplements they might want to take.
I think it's really easy to minimise stress, isn't it? Because you say, oh, I'm just stressed, but like I don't think anyone really fully appreciates the effect on the body. So just a couple of questions. So Ashley's saying, so if you're taking a multivitamin, can you still take like a trying to conceive vitamin, like a presume you meant like the folic acid type 1. Ashley, can you take the two of them at the same time? Someone else.
It really depends what's in them, to be honest, because if you're taking a good multi and you're also taking that, you could be taking too much of certain things. So a good multi will have things in it like folate, it'll have zinc in it, it'll have your calcium and magnesium, etc. A trying to conceive one is probably also going to have folate, it's probably going to have zinc, selenium in it, and those things as well. So you just want to make sure you're not taking too much, because there are levels of each of those that you want to watch what you're doing.
You don't want to go over. Okay.
Absolutely. So I would say if that's the case, if you want to take something and in general without sort of looking at you specifically and getting some advice, stick to the trying to conceive one, because it's probably going to have quite good levels of most things, but it's going to have good levels of the things we know you need, as you say, like the zinc and the selenium, the B6, etc., that we know are needed specifically in fertility.
Okay, cool. So just so someone's asking there about, Kira's asking just about you did mention men at the start, so the male, the sperm factor. Kira's asking specifically about DNA fragmentation, but do you have any advice for the sperm side of things? So for that.
Yeah. So sperm in particular is really high on needing antioxidant. Okay, so oxidative stress is what basically happens to our cells, and that's if the cells are damaged in any way, and they're damaged by inflammation, and they're damaged by what we call oxidative stress. So things like smoking, things like alcohol, etc., things like stress are going to damage those cells and make it difficult for the DNA to be produced properly. So for sperm in particular, you really want to look at really good antioxidant levels. So folate is also good for that. Omega-3 that we spoke about earlier is really good for DNA and for brain development and things like that as well. But you get omega-3 is really good from good fats. So that's your extra virgin olive oil, that's your oily fish, which I tell everybody, try and have some oily fish 2 or 3 times a week, because you're going to get really good omega-3. But also for sperm in particular, zinc is really, really good, specifically for DNA transcription, the synthesis of proteins to build the sperm, and for the expression of the hormones as well. So zinc is really good. For men, we usually say that they need about 9 milligrams of zinc a day. And you can get that just from a handful of seeds. So the nuts and seeds that we spoke about earlier, get your men to be having that as well. That's really good too. And get them just to watch what they're drinking and smoking it, and the red meat as well. Take out those inflammatory things if you can, and put more anti-inflammatory in. Those are really good. Another one that's good for sperm development is something called CoQ10, which is a compound in the body. It's used in energy production. It's a cofactor for that. And so in our cells we have mitochondria, which is where the energy is produced in the cells. And where you need a lot of energy, you'll find cells that have loads of mitochondria in it, and in other areas you might not have so much. So for instance, in our heart, we've got loads of mitochondria because it works really hard and needs loads of energy. Sperm is the same. Sperm needs loads of mitochondria and loads of energy. So CoQ10 in particular is quite good. You can get that in a supplement as well, but you can also eat that as well. So again, your lean meats and fish, things like broccoli, strawberries, the seeds that we spoke about, sesame seeds are really good for CoQ10, and soybeans, so products like tofu and tempeh as well are good for that. So definitely those are the main things I would say when men are looking at sort of sperm production and motility.
Okay. That's loads to think about for men. Just Rebecca missed about the seeds. Everyone's fascinated with the seeds. I am as well. So the first part of the cycle, we're looking at what 2 seeds, and the second part, can you just repeat that for us?
So the first part of the cycle, we're looking at flax seeds and pumpkin seeds. So your flax seeds are going to boost, so the flax seeds and the pumpkin seeds are going to boost your estrogen levels, or hopefully they're going to boost those. So that's because they have an estrogenic effect and are high in the zinc, ready for your progesterone. And then in the second half of the cycle, you switch that out to sesame seeds and sunflower seeds, which are both really known to support progesterone levels.
Hope you got that there, Rebecca. I'm just going to quickly look at my questions again. Right, so environmental factors, but I think we've touched on a lot of them. So we've done the organic thing, and we know the reasons you think that. plastics. This is where, to me, it started to get really scary when reading about it. I was like, oh my God, because it is, to me, I'm like, it gives me the fear. And, I don't know if I'm alone in that, but I'm just like, oh my God, they're everywhere. So do you have any opinion on plastics and what to not do and blah, blah, blah?
Yeah, and that's the thing, it can get really scary when you start to read it, and I don't like to sort of come on and say to people, you have to get rid of every plastic in your house. I mean, it would be amazing if you could, but it's not practical all the time. But yeah, absolutely, plastics are a big thing. So most plastics will have things in them like BPAs, PETs, PVCs, polystyrene. All of those things are known xenoestrogens, we call them, or hormone disruptors. So they will act like estrogen in the body and will attach to your estrogen receptors in the cells, and then obviously disrupt the estrogen that your body is producing, that type of thing. But they can also leach chemicals and things like that. So what I tend to say for things like plastics are, the softer the plastic is, the more likely it can leach toxins or things into the food or the liquid that it's containing, and you then obviously ingest that sort of thing. So if when you're with water, try not to buy the plastic bottles of water, but if you do have to buy it, don't reuse that bottle, because the more, when it goes a bit crinkly and things like that, that's when you know that you're starting to break up the plastic and you might be sort of leaching those things in. Try not to cook in plastic tubs in the microwave if you can avoid it. Transfer your food onto a plate or into a glass bowl or something like that if you're going to do that in the microwave, just to, again, avoid heating up the plastic, and then it's got more chance to leach out any of those chemicals you want to do. And when you're storing your foods, it's not always practical to say throw out every plastic tub you've got, but try and go for glass or bamboo containers. But if you're using plastic in the house, a really good tip is sometimes just to line it with some greaseproof paper before you put the food in, and that means the food's not touching the plastic, and that can help with that as well. So that's what I tend to do, and then you just obviously try and swap it out as you go through times. And try to buy, when you're buying your fruit and veg, if you can buy it outside the wrapper or in a paper bag rather than in the plastic, then that's obviously helpful as well, because it's not been sitting there for a while in that plastic. So yeah, plastic's a big thing as well.
It's huge. I mean, oh my God, I couldn't read the whole article, but I started it, and it was about a study that had found particles of plastic in a placenta, in the human placenta. So that's how far humans have got with plastic, and it's just, to me, I was like, I can't even finish this. It's actually giving me palpitations. It was like, oh my God. So
absolutely. And you find it's in things like, I think I just stopped my daughter from buying the scented sort of balls that you put in your laundry to try and make it smell better, sort of thing, and she was putting it in the laundry, and I was like, we need to stop this. Trying not to scare people, but I'm like, yeah, don't have that. Other things to think about in terms of environmental factors. So things like alcohol, what we know about, I think we kind of know that bit to death. So those are obvious ones. But things like the way that you cook your foods. So when you're cooking on really high heats, so like barbecuing or grilling or frying on really high heats, you can sometimes, or meats in particular, will produce things called PAS and AGEs. So PAS are polycystic aromatic hydrocarbons, and AGEs are advanced glycation end products, right? So scary sounding chemicals, but basically those guys as well can really cause inflammation in the body. And AGEs in particular are known to attach to the estrogen receptors around our body, which we have everywhere, but obviously we've got them mostly in the ovaries and the reproductive organs. But they're actually, this was quite recent, I was reading this, there had been a study that looked at these AGEs that had accumulated around the ovaries, and they'd caused an inflammatory cascade, and that was preventing implantation. So things like that just to think about. So when you're cooking, I'm not saying you should never have a barbecue or you should never grill your food, but try and just make sure that that's not how you're always doing your food. Try not to always be frying and grilling. Try to water cook as much as possible. Steam your food if you can, rather than boiling. The only reason I say that is because when you boil it, some of the nutrients will come out into the cooking water and you're losing it. So if you steam, it's better, or if you're frying, maybe try just frying in a little bit of water.
Right.
That type of thing, and try and do it on quite a low heat if you can. And that kind of avoids those type of things, because they can be quite big too. And the other thing to think about is the sort of chemicals around your house. So heavy metals and other toxins that you can be exposed to. So the amount of heavy metals that people are exposed to and maybe don't realise from maybe work environments. So if you work in a factory with lots of chemicals, if you work on a farm, then you want to just be mindful of those things and try and mitigate those by having that anti-inflammatory diet. But also things like your household cleaning and personal hygiene products can have things like parabens in them that are absorbed directly into the skin. Mm-hmm. They go straight into the skin. It means they're not being detoxified by the liver. They're going straight through, that type of thing. So try also and go for clean products if you can look for things that don't have parabens and are maybe organic products as well, rather than...
What would that be in? Like, I've heard of them in terms of shampoos and stuff. So shampoo...
So shampoos, maybe, yeah, right. Spray deodorants, that type of thing that you have. Yep. So particularly things that are maybe aerosol based, so as say your deodorants or hairsprays, that type of thing, but they can be in shampoos as well. They can be in laundry products too. As I say, it's really just about being mindful of those things, and if you can make some changes, make some changes. It can be really, as you said, it can be really overwhelming to do all of these things at once. So it's just about doing what you can, but yeah, it's definitely something to think about.
That's frightening, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, what else? So in terms of, we've probably touched on a lot of this, but what is the kind of, if you're thinking about nutrition and fertility, what's the main thing we're targeting? Is it, what can fertility help? Is it egg quality, endometrium quality, hormonal fluctuations, or all of the above? What are we looking at with fertility?
It's all of the above and more. So the first thing really, I suppose, is your hormones. You want to get them into some sort of balance so that we can make sure that you're ovulating and that type of thing. So that's your estrogen and progesterone. So those are the good fats, the cholesterol that I spoke about, that will give you the omega-3s that you need to be producing those hormones in particular. So oily fish, nuts, seeds, those type of things in particular, to get those in. And they also give you the vitamins and minerals that you need as cofactors. And there are certain vitamins that are fat-soluble vitamins, and so you need to be eating fat in order to absorb those vitamins. So that's A, D, E and K. You definitely need to get your fats in. So in terms of the hormone balance, it's about those anti-inflammatory foods and the good fats. When you're thinking about egg quality, again, it's the same. It's an anti-inflammatory diet, but you want to try and enhance the environment that the egg is being released into. And you want to try and keep your eggs as in good quality as you can, sort of thing. So we all know that you're born with the eggs that you're going to have, but if you have a lot of oxidative stress that can damage those eggs and damage the cells around it, then that's going to mean that egg that released is probably not as good quality as you might want it to be, and the environment around about it isn't as good. So that's things, again, like making sure that you're not smoking, that you're reducing alcohol and caffeine, that you're cutting out as much processed food as you can, and that you're getting those really high antioxidant foods in that we spoke about before, the fruit and the veg and the really good colours in your diet. And then for your endometriosis, it's exactly the same really, but again, you're trying to provide as good an environment for implantation as possible. So as well as looking after all of those nutrients, you need a good blood supply and you need a good oxygen supply for those. So you're thinking there about your vascular system. So that really needs good fats and good proteins for those, and that keeps those tissues pliable and it keeps it thick, that sort of thing. So things for good for blood, particularly beetroot. Beetroot's really good as a vasodilator for your blood system and getting things moving in the oxygen going around your system. So definitely think about that for endometriosis. And then I think it's really just about looking after your stress levels. We spoke about it already, but I really can't stress enough that stress is a big thing. And it really has a big impact on what your hormones are doing in your system. You know, people talk about, like, if you're stressed, if you're in chronic stress, your body is only thinking about making sure you survive. It's not thinking about conceiving. You know, it will cut off things. It will cut off things like your gut. It will stop your stomach from doing what it's meant to be doing. It'll stop your gut digesting, and it'll stop your hormones because it'll say, I don't actually need, to release an egg. I don't need to produce estrogen. I need to run away from this tiger, that type of thing. And that's what your body is doing. So the more you can do to try and relieve that stress, then the better it is for your system, just to get things doing what they should be doing.
Definitely. I'm always lecturing them about that, but they come and it does help, definitely. Right, so we haven't actually spoken about dairy at all, I don't think, and Faye's got a question just about dairy, but she's wondering about full fat dairy, buttermilk. Would you go, if you're going to eat dairy, would you recommend going to the full fat, or like, what have you got opinions on dairy and fertility?
Yeah, so I would say you don't necessarily need to go to the full fat, and I would say probably not. No, I would not to go with too much dairy. I don't tell people to cut out dairy because that's sometimes the way that they're getting the fats in. I would say probably try and go more for things like the avocados and the nuts and the seeds that we spoke about, and the oily fish for your fats and that type of thing. Obviously you need calcium, and people say, well, if I don't eat dairy, where am I going to get my calcium from? You get calcium from tons of other things. Green leafy veg that we spoke about is really good for calcium as well. What else have we got for calcium? Nuts and seeds, that type of thing. Rhubarb, quinoa, loads of stuff that's really good for calcium. So please don't feel if you're cutting back a wee bit on dairy that you're not going to get that. You can do that if you go for a really varied diet. I don't tell people not to have dairy. I just say don't go overboard with the dairy, because if you think dairy products have animal hormones in them too. So if you're ingesting a lot of that, then you're impacting your own hormone balance and how you're making those hormones in your system. So it's quite good to think about reducing your dairy if you can, but not necessarily cutting it out completely. So go for things like soy milks and things like that are really
that someone's asking there. Rebecca's asking about dairy alternatives. So soy milk, does that interrupt with estrogen though? I always hear about that in terms of soy milk. Are you better with an almond milk, or are you better with an oat milk, or anything?
So you can take any of these. So soy is a big thing that people do concern themselves about, because it does have an estrogenic effect as well. It's a phytoestrogen too. So for soy, what I say about soy is two things. Unless you have a history of an estrogen type cancer, so if you have breast cancer or something like that in your system and you aren't already eating soy, you might not want to suddenly add in loads of soy to your diet. But if you're already eating it, carry on. But what to do is try and go for good soy, so try and avoid the GMO soy, so the sort of cheap soy burgers and things like that, maybe don't go for those, but go for things like the tofu and the tempeh and those sort of things that are good quality soy, because some of the evidence suggests that it's the GMO of the soy that's not the great thing that's really having the impact. But soy it's a phytoestrogen, so it kind of works in the same way as the flax seeds that we spoke about before. So it has what we call a weak estrogenic effect. So if you have high estrogen in your system, the estrogen in the soy or the nuts or the seeds can attach to that cell receptor and stop your own estrogen attaching, and therefore it reduces the effect of that. But if you have low estrogen, then again, that soy estrogen can attach and actually boost the estrogen that you've got in your system. So it's adaptogenic, it can do both sort of things. So I say to people, if you don't normally eat soy, don't go mad on it, but it's not a problem to add it into your diet. It's not a problem at all.
Okay. Rebecca's saying she's soy intolerant, so yeah. The other alternatives okay then?
Yeah, absolutely. Go for almond milk or that sort of thing. Coconut milk maybe.
So Alexandra just had a question on fish.
Sorry, the question was...
Sorry, Rebecca, I'm just going to quickly mute you. Is that okay? Unless you've got a wee question.
Sorry.
Oh, cool. Just on fish. So Alexandra's saying she remembers from her biology degree that they tend to find a lot of hormones in fish sometimes, the synthetic hormones. So what can one have instead to get the good oils if you want to avoid,
So if you want to avoid fish, then go for things like extra virgin olive oil. That's probably the best oil to be having. And those nuts and seeds that we spoke about before are really, really good to get those omega-3s in. They're excellent options.
Cool. Let me just check my list of questions. So yeah, I think that's the end of my list of questions. How is it 4 minutes to 9? That's mad, isn't it? I never fails to amaze me when I do these talks, how fascinating and how quick it goes. But anyone else get any questions while we've got Jen here? Okay, so probiotic drinks for gut health. What do we think about that?
Yes, absolutely. Probiotics are really good for your gut health. So I suppose they're not necessary. If you're eating a good balanced diet, then you should have a really good diverse gut microbiome. But if you're having particular issues, maybe with things like constipation, diarrhea, with bloating, that type of thing, then probiotics can sometimes be helpful. The best one probably is like lactobacillus, which you'll find in most anyway, but that's probably the main one that people tend to take. But think also about prebiotic foods. So that's things like your garlic and your onion and artichoke, those type of things that actually feeds. So your probiotic is where you're actually ingesting the bacteria that's already there in the drink and trying to repopulate your gut. If you have prebiotic foods, then you're kind of feeding that bacteria or the good bacteria in your gut and trying to sort of proliferate them that way, the ones that are there. So either, but yeah, absolutely, probiotics are a good thing.
Ashley's asking about IBS, which I think could be a whole other webinar.
Yeah.
But any quick tips then for IBS?
Again, it's going to be eating. So the probiotics is a good thing sometimes for IBS. Just maybe go a little slow with them. Sometimes if you go for really high, they can irritate things to start with. So just be mindful of that. But again, it's just about trying to cut out the things that are inflammatory and go for the anti-inflammatory things. Things like your garlic and onions are really good for gut healing. Things like cabbage is really good for gut healing. So again, it's all those vegetables, the green leafies. So your broccoli, cauliflower, kale, all of those guys are really good for the gut as well. Some people find that if they're not normally eating a lot of those vegetables and then they add them in, that will sometimes cause a reaction to start with, just because your gut is not used to those. The microbiomes are having a field day with all the great stuff that you're putting in there. So sometimes it's best to maybe go low and slow with that sort of thing. But
yeah, I've definitely found that myself. I've really almost got rid of IBS by going for everything you basically said there. But at first it's like a killer, and you do need to just draw it back and then just gradually add it
absolutely.
in. It does work in the end. And Alexandra, definitely reducing stress helped with IBS.
It does.
Took a year after my PhD. PhDs will do that too, won't they? Yeah, but stress again, totally,
Yeah.
isn't it? Such an effect on everything. Absolutely everything. Anything specific to make sure you're getting right? So again, polycystic ovary syndrome is a big one. It's huge, isn't it, with nutrition? So just anything specific to make sure you're getting every day for your for PCOS, or avoiding. Is there any biggies for that imbalance?
Yeah. So with PCOS, you quite often you're looking at insulin resistance as well with that as well. So you want to make sure that you're really balancing your blood sugars throughout the day. So that's things we spoke about earlier on. That's your complex carbohydrates. So that's making sure you're having some oats and grains if you can. You're having those brown pastas, brown bread, brown rice, and avoiding the white ones that are going to really spike that insulin, because that will have a major effect on it. It's having a bit of protein with every meal, again, to try and steady those blood sugars across the day. And that seems to be the biggie with Pcos in particular that I can talk about is insulin resistance. And that insulin does have an impact on your estrogen levels as well. So if you can get that under control, you tend to find that it might balance up your estrogen and your progesterone levels, because that's sometimes why people maybe struggle to ovulate with Pcos, is that. So it's usually working on the insulin levels first of all to do that. Another thing that sometimes you'll get a supplement for Pcos, and it will be chromium. But you can eat chromium as well, and again, it's in wholemeal breads and rye and that type of thing. Oysters, if you like oysters, that type of thing. But peppers and eggs and that type of thing are really good for chromium too. So maybe adding those things into your diet too could be helpful.
Anyone else get anything? Oysters probably quite an expensive one.
Probably is.
Can you imagine sourcing them? Shucking your oysters every day for it. Cool. Anyone else? Thank you so much for coming, guys. We're going to be doing more work. I'm going to be doing a bit more work with Jen over the next few weeks, which is exciting. Getting some material together for you guys as well, which will be really good. So we're working on that next, aren't we, Jen? This is our next thing. So I have all your email addresses from your registering. So well, actually, nobody's asked anything you've not answered. But if you've got any questions, direct them to me, and then if you're happy, I'll pass it on to Jen. And
I'll have a look specifically more about the progesterone for you, just to see if there's anything else I can suggest, and I'll send that one to you.
Oh yeah, it was progesterone.
Yeah, I'll do that for you, no problem.
And let me just see if there's anything else. Oh, thank you guys, thank you so much.
No.
Someone else just asked me, I think, just about yoga as in the Fertility Network yoga, and it's starting back next week, I believe. So hope saying thank you to everyone's just saying thank you. I hope you're okay. Okay guys, take care.
I'm going to say one last thing, if you don't mind, Annie. So I'm going to just say, please don't let this sort of stuff cause any more stress. You can only do what you can do, you know. So please don't, you know, if you're having a glass of wine on a Saturday night, have your glass of wine and enjoy it. So please don't think I have to cut out all the good stuff that you really like. Please, it's all in moderation. So just please look after yourself. And the last thing is, remember that you have to have sex. So make sure you're having sex and enjoying it, because that's the best thing to do, and that's going to obviously.
Often you need a glass of wine for that as well. So, lovely to see everybody, and thank you so much, and thank you, Jen. That was amazing. Just
thank you all for coming. It's lovely to meet you.
Okay, guys, take care. I'm going to close the webinar now. Okay, bye bye.
Bye bye.